Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pain. Sit your ass down. Sit your ass down and strap in. This is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt. Let's talk about the suffering. It's time to start the pain. This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
An angel sat on my shoulder and pontificated the proper way to live. This angel impressed the virtue of patience in the pursuit. Embrace all that is good in life, and the fruits of your choices will come back tenfold. This angel promised joy. On the other shoulder sat the devil. He sold a pretty good package. With the promise of instant gratification, little effort, pleasure, and freedom from sorrow and pain. The devil promised all this and much more, and it could be mine in the snap of a finger. The devil promised happiness. There is a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness feels good. It's relatively easy, but it's very temporary. Joy is unshakable and lasts forever, but takes an enormous amount of work and suffering. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Falason. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we sit down with Ron Lewis to discuss the suffering of a pastor. Ron took all his suffering and used that suffering to build a community of joy. Thank you so much, Pastor Ron, for sitting down with us.
Great to see you, my friend.
Pastor Ron Lewis. They call him the bishop, I heard.
I read Mike's exposing me. Yes.
Well, just so you know, Pastor Ron just came out with a book, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in this episode. It's Miracles in Manhattan. It's a wonderful book. It's a very, I would call it serendipitous book.
Yeah.
Just whether it's chance, and it's going to lead into our social media question.
Yeah, I would call it serendipitous, but I don't know what serendipitous means, so I'll just take your word for it.
We're next episode. I'm putting a dictionary right here, so you can just look up all the big words.
We can add that to our podcast dictionary.
That's it. So that's going to every week we take a question from one of our guests or one of our audience members, and this week was perfect for you because it has specifically to do with Miracles in Manhattan.
Okay.
And Margaret from Kearney writes, "Do you believe in coincidence and why?" So, Pastor Ron, you're our guest today, so let's hear from you.
Yeah, I personally do not believe in coincidence in an absolute sense. That I believe that this world has order, and that God. I believe we're in an open universe. That means that we can connect with God, and we believe that God acts without crossing our will. At the same time, there is free will, but there is God's plan and purpose. And so I would say we live in a structured universe where things happen, both good and evil, and bad happens. But I don't think anything is coincidental. I think everything has a reason and a purpose, good or bad. I think God uses everything and anything for his glory without being the cause of evil or sinful stuff. That God is good. He's fundamentally good. He cares for all of his creation, all of humanity. And yet he has a plan and a purpose, and sometimes we don't understand that. We live in a lot of mysteries, which if that's what somebody means by coincidental, then sure, I understand what you're saying there. But in an absolute way, I don't think anything is ultimately coincidental. I think everything has a plan. There's a purpose. There's a divine plan and a divine purpose, and we're not just people living in chaos here. We are all part of a plan.
There's a lot of different schools of thought when it comes to religion. Like you have the Calvinist belief, which is like you take a basketball and you spin it, and that's what God did. He just put the basketball up there and spun it, and whatever happens. And then you have those that believe in predestiny, and you sort of just intermingled those two theories where you're not interfering with free will. It's sort of like a Bruce Almighty type of situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Just you can do anything you want, you just can't screw with free will. I try to screw with this guy's free will every day.
Isn't Bruce Almighty when he pulled the sun closer?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, the moon
closer.
The moon.
Great.
That was from a Jimmy Stewart movie. So yeah.
Oh, good.
I like that he tells his girlfriend or his wife.
Life.
Was it A Wonderful Life? I'm going to give you the moon. I'll give you the moon. Mike, what do you think?
You know, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but I definitely believe everything happens for a reason. You know, sometimes you're put in a spot for a reason. Sometimes you're not in a spot for a reason. You know, I remember one story when I was growing up, a friend of mine they were going to go down the shore. And they had a whole bunch of guys that were going to get in a car and go down the shore. And I was going to go, and something happened at the last minute, and I didn't go. They wound up getting into a car accident. One kid was killed, another kid was paralyzed.
Unbelievable.
And I could have been in that car that day. And that's something I think about to this day. Was it coincidence I didn't go, or was it, like you said, maybe God's will?
No, it was the devil playing a trick on me. But
Could be.
You know, that your life unfolds from the decisions that you made, that free will decision. So it's a little scary to think about it. If you just take a step right too far, or you take a step left too far, and next thing you know, a couch is falling on you.
Yeah, it's weird too, because one of the guys that was in the car that day, I still see him all the time, and he's just not the same person. You know, I think about it all the time. Like, I should have been there. I could have been there.
I don't believe in coincidence. I really don't. I'm going to take the other path on that.
Wow.
Because
He's just trying to be
different.
He's trying to be Kevin.
Just trying to be
Wasn't
different.
sure where he was coming from.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you put it on the
Listen,
table.
We've been doing this for over a year. I never know where he's coming from.
Isn't that interesting?
I look at my personal incident, my shooting, and I used to look at it as just bad luck, bad coincidence.
Oh, my.
And now, being so far removed from it, there was a purpose behind it.
Right.
There was a purpose behind my suffering. I had to go through it. It was meant for me to lead me in a different direction, to lead me to this show, to the Suffering Podcast, to lead me to you, to lead me to Mike. You know, Mike and I knew each other for 25 years, but we didn't really know each other. So I'm just taking that one example, which sounds really horrible, like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I wasn't. I was in the right place. I was right where I was supposed to be at that particular time when I needed to be there. So I don't. Mark,
I'm sure you've heard this before, too, about your shooting, because I've heard it about mine. People would say, I'm glad it was you in that situation. Because you have some cops out there that may not have handled that situation correctly.
I'm sure.
could have gone south real quick.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, listen, I'm not blowing smoke up or either of our asses. Most cops probably would have done the same thing, but a lot of people said, I'm glad it was you that was there.
The thing with us and the story we're about to get in with you is you had to do it. You had to do it to be who you are. Because without your past, you're not Pastor Ron Lewis. You're not Mike Felice. I'm not Kevin Donaldson.
That's so true.
It's truth. So that's why I don't believe in coincidence. Margaret, thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions. We'll try to get them on.
That was Margaret from Kearney. That's a local girl.
That's a local girl. We try to pull them from New York, California. We try to stay within our audience. Before we go any further, I want to thank our biggest sponsor, and that's Toyota of Hackensack. I buy my cars from Toyota Hackensack because I trust them. I know they're going to treat me fairly. I know they're going to give me a good deal, and they're going to have the selection that I want. So go to toyotaofhackensack.com and let them find you a car. So Pastor Ron, and I'm going to call you Pastor Ron because I think you've after 40 years of ministry.
Yeah, that's right. 40 years.
40 years of ministry. I think you've earned that title. If anybody is bestowed that honor on anybody, I think that should be bestowed on you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, we call him the bishop.
The bishop. Because that sounds too Catholic.
I read that in his bio before I came up.
Thank you, Mike.
Commonly referred to as the bishop.
It's an affectionate term. It simply means overseer. And when you outgrow one church and you start working in other churches, now it's dozens of churches, that seems to be the title that works. But I love being called pastor. It's what I've been doing. I love people. It's all about people. It's all about people. It's not about big-time theological terms and trying to, come across as if you're some real genius and everybody else you're condescending, just like looking down upon you. None of that. It's all about people. God's interest, my interest is people.
And I want to ask this very distinct question to you. When you're going out and giving your talks, would it be, because I already know the answer to this. This is a loaded question. If you were speaking to 10,000 people and you were able to get a quarter of your message out, or you're able to speak to that one person and get 100% of your message out, which would you prefer? I already know this answer, just knowing you in a short time that I do. What do you think that would be?
So I think the message would be good news that God sent his son into the world to live a life that we could not live, to die a death that we should have died, but he did it in our place. And he was wrapped up, a dead man, put in a tomb. 3 days later, he rose. And he's saying to everyone that I'm available. And if you repent, meaning change your mind and turn from your ways and receive just that gift of faith, that your whole life will be put on a brand new trajectory and you'll be changed from the inside out.
And then we got Easter.
Then we got to hide the eggs.
We got Easter.
Then we got to hide the eggs.
My kids are all into the eggs.
Oh, yeah. So the eggs, I never understood that. It's just like I don't understand the Christmas tree with the nativity. But I'm sure it wasn't always this way for you. I know, listen, everybody has to find their path in life.
Right.
And you have a pretty interesting.
I was going to say, you weren't born saying, I'm going to be a pastor.
Heck no.
See, me, I lost my faith in college. I did.
Okay,
I
yeah.
lost my faith. I was very tied into my faith when I went to college.
You were an atheist, is that right?
No, I wasn't an atheist. I was going into college for theological studies.
Oh, my goodness.
And I lost my faith. I had a class taught by an ex-Jesuit priest called Dr. John Becker. It was The Bible as Literature, because when you read the Bible as literature,
Sure.
it's violent. It's violent.
You're right about that. It's tough, isn't it?
David cuts off foreskins. Saul told him to go get the foreskins. David cuts off. I mean, think about that. You don't just cut off the foreskin of a man and let him walk away. It doesn't happen that way. The whole thing comes off. So it's a violent book.
I am not going to touch that. I'm going nowhere near it.
You're not supposed to use your teeth. But, it's
Oh, my goodness.
it's not – it's a violent book. And so I lost my faith for a long time. I lost my faith. And it thankfully it returned. But when you were growing up, like, what was your path?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I started in a secular Jewish family, and that was through my father's influence. That's how he was raised. My mother went along with it. She said, let's do this. We went in the synagogue, and my father disappeared roughly when I was around 10 or 11 years old. He literally disappeared. That was it. It was in the 60s. He was a musician, trained in, he was Atlanta Symphony. He was trained at the highest level of conservatory music and all of that. And he just reached that place where the creative arts took over, and he became a different man. And it was violent. It was when he left.
Did he physically disappeared, or he disappeared as your father figure?
Both.
Both.
Yeah. He just
Did he go
left the
traveling
family.
with the Grateful Dead or anything like that?
Probably. I never heard about the Grateful Dead, but it was a lot of Inagata Davida. It was
Iron
going
Butterfly.
down,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, he was one of the early responders to the drug scene, and it just radically altered his brain, his mind, his life, and how he treated us. And so there was both a sadness when he left, but also a gladness. Things just began to settle down.
Sigh of relief, maybe.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so we became a family of just agnostic. We quit everything. And then when I was 15 years old, the lady up the street, the proverbial kind of Saturday Night Live church lady, came down, knocked on the door, told me she wanted to give me a gift. Turns out it was a Bible. I'd never read the Bible. I never knew God. I never cared about God. I was just an angry kid who had a busted family, and this woman gave me that. I just sort of laughed when she left. And when you're in the South, you say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, ma'am, all that. You just go through the polite things. And then when she left, I just made fun of her, and I thought, who is this woman? She's just crazy. And I took it off. My mother came out when I was 18, going off to college, and she said, hey, you have this left in your closet. You got this book that I'd never cracked open. And I took it off to college, and for some strange reason, for the first time, I began to read it. I saw the table of contents, the book of Psalms, the book of Job, the book of, it's like all these things. I was totally 100% biblically illiterate. And yet somehow, some way, I saw my brother's name. It was Mark. I began to read the Gospel of Mark, and I had this encounter while I was a college student. So while you were walking away from God in college, which is a very common story, what's uncommon is somebody who meets God, and God pursued me, and I had a heart change while I was in the dorm. And it was just a game changer for me. It just changed who I was. It was a change from the inside, and it changed how I behaved on the outside.
Now, this was at the University of North Carolina, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, so I was in the UNC system the whole time. And
So he's got the Tar Heel blue hat on.
At a big college. At a big college. Think about how rare this is, where other kids are going out and partying, you're sitting in your dorm finding God.
Yeah, I know.
That's amazing.
I had a little trickle over the parties, you know.
Of course.
little trickle
You're
over.
human.
Put the Bible down for a couple minutes.
Yeah, right.
But you know
right.
what? That's an important point.
It,
That's
yeah, it
an
was a
important-
process for me. It wasn't.
You're a human being, which means you're fallible. You know, you are not infallible. You've done all the things that human beings do. You've
Yep.
imbibed, I'm sure. You know, you've sinned and done all different things. And if you didn't, and if you told me you didn't, I would think less of you because I know you weren't telling the truth.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I will say, and this is being transparent here, but I will say that 2 or 3 things left me instantly when I had this encounter in the dorm room. One is that I was no longer angry. It was gone. It was just, I can't explain it, but it was just, I had peace. First time in my life, 18 years old, had peace. Second thing is I instantly quit smoking cigarettes. Just stopped.
Cold turkey, just
Cold turkey. It wasn't even like I was trying. It's like, oh, I haven't had a smoke. Then it's a week later. Then it's 2 weeks, and you just forget about it. Now, you know, I can still. Here I am, like decades later. Sometimes I smell a cigarette and I think, wouldn't that be nice?
See, I'm a reformed smoker. I smell cigarette smoke. I'm like, thank God I stopped because that does not smell good. That doesn't. And, you know, when I was doing it, it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But I had a friend of mine who quit smoking, and somebody told him, oh, just go cold turkey. Comes back 2 weeks later, you know, I bought a pound of cold turkey and I put it in my lip and it's not working. I'm not kidding you.
No
like
way.
that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Kevin did grow up with the smartest people.
No, this is North Jersey. This happened in North Jersey. But that's so
Brilliant.
Jewish kid finds God. And you know, I have to point this out because there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that Jesus was Jewish. I'm not kidding you.
Oh man.
My father was one of them. My father, I go, you know,
Jewish carpenter.
I go, you know, Jesus was a Jew. No, he wasn't. I'm like, what was he?
Catholic?
No, he's Christian. Really? Like really? But that's the biblical illiteracy that you talk about. Now, there's a lot of people that have it.
Well, the whole community. I mean, every Christian owes we owe our existence of our faith to the Jewish people who gave us the concept of God, a creator, a single God, that God is all powerful, all knowing, all present. That
Has a sense of humor too.
Oh man,
He's got a sense of humor like I've never seen.
For real.
Yeah. But so I speak about this in one of our sponsors, Belladonna Cigars. By the way, go to belladonnacigars.com, put in the Suffering 10, and you'll get a special discount. But our very good friend Chantel Leavitt is Jewish, and we go back and forth all the time because she is not a practicing Jew. She is more of a Christian person. But you know, I consider her my sister for many different reasons. Like I've never had a sister. I only had a brother. I never had a sister because we connect on a lot of different things because she is, you know, spiritual, which I'm always leery of spiritual people.
Sure.
Spiritual people get the opportunity to do whatever they want to do, you know?
And blame it on their spirituality.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to drink a lot tonight, but I'm spiritual. I'm going to sleep around.
I'm sure the drink helped you to be spiritual.
Yeah, I'm going to sleep around with women, but don't worry, I'm spiritual. You know, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. So that always shocked me. Now, would you consider your father leaving just one of your biggest sufferings of your life?
It was my initial era of suffering. Yeah. Definitely.
Your initial foray into suffering.
Right. So when you have a dad who comes to get you at school and his hair is down to his bottom, it's cool now, but back then it wasn't so cool, you know. Yeah. And your parents embarrassed you, and then there are those violent moments where my father was actually trying to kill my mother, choke her to death, and I jumped on his back, and then he swung me off, but it brought enough sense into him to stop. I mean, this is what goes on behind the scenes in closed door homes.
Was that like a drug induced thing at that point?
It was not. He was just an angry, violent man. And then when I had my encounter in college, and it was 3 years later. I was a junior in college, and I was reading Malachi chapter 4. That's the last book of the Old Testament. And by the way, with the Jewish part of it, they not only gave us the concept of God, but they gave us the Bible, they gave us the prophets, they gave us the covenants of God, they gave us the wisdom of God, they gave us Peter, Paul, and Mary, they gave us, the whole gang. So, and Jesus himself, of course. So that moment in college, when I got the last verse of the Old Testament, it says that God says that I will restore the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And when I read that, I knew on the inside, it's like the Bible sometimes, it's called living inactive. And when that word came to me, I knew that I need to go find him. It had been 10 years. So I went and I found my father. He was in California. I went and visited him. We got reconciled. And that's just a simple statement with 3 days of just heartbroken conversations.
A lot of tears.
A lot of tears. But he manned up and he said, I'm sorry. And I looked at him and I said, I want you to know I forgive you. Forgiveness is probably one of the most powerful things in the universe that really helps to turn suffering around. And we suffer, but for me to get that load off of my chest, off of my heart, the poison left me at that moment. And then his issues he had to own his issues because his own son would not condemn him and keep us in that vicious cycle of death and revenge and destruction and bitterness and unforgiveness. So I walked away a free young man. I was free, and it changed my life. And a year or two later, he called me. He said, can I come out and see you? I was in Chapel Hill, and he came out to see me, and that became his turning point where he just broke, and he cried for like 2 hours and just wept and wept and wept. And then I called my brother. He was at Duke. He was a Duke guy. I was a Chapel Hill guy. And
it must have been good holiday dinners at your house.
Tremendous. Just the greatest rivalry in history. It's just so awesome. But my brother came over to witness. I just said to my dad before he got on the plane, I said, I'm going to baptize you. And so filled up the bathtub. We didn't have any water. We didn't have any holy water or church water. We just had a tub. So I baptized my dad in the tub. He got on that plane, and he ended up moving back to be a part of my life and our church. He married, after 3 wives and 3 broken homes and all that stuff, he married the sweetest middle-aged woman in our community, and she's still with us today, Jeannie. They had a very, very happy and joyful marriage. He became a counselor. He went back and got his second master's degree, this time in Christian therapy. And he became a man who healed a lot of men of their afflictions and diseases, mental diseases, mental health problems, and all that.
Because it sounds like he forgave himself.
You got that right.
And that's the big thing. It's because
yes.
Mike and I struggle with this. I never forgive him. I can't forgive him. But
he's beyond forgiveness.
Yeah,
now. I mean,
you guys.
But Mike,
we just deal with each other now.
Mike and I think we have a tough time forgiving ourselves because when our lives were in chaos and had no direction, we did some very unhealthy things. We did some bad things. And to the point where, how can I ever come out of this? I can't. I'm a horrible person. I don't belong here. I just, there's no place in this world for me anymore.
The world would be better off without me.
Yeah, we and then you start going down a real big rabbit hole. But we have a tough time forgiving ourselves. And we see this with other people that we help, people that are close to us who are going through their trials. It's just, one of our good friends here is about to check himself into rehab. And I sent him a message. I said, you got to forgive yourself, man. You're not the person that you're making yourself out to be. We build ourselves up. We build things up in our mind, and we create these scenarios that become reality after a while because we just can't forgive ourselves.
But are you trying to live up to that false reality?
Yes.
You set that reality for yourself, and it's a false reality. And if you don't meet those standards,
we all do this to ourselves. I'm sure.
We do.
In 40 years of ministry, I don't know you all that well, but I'm sure there's times where you build things up in your mind and you create these scenarios that aren't exactly real.
I think we all do that. So there's a guy named Dr. Daniel Amen. He's done more brain scans than anyone in history. He's in California. He's got clinics all over the country. And it's his research that helped me to understand that 80% of all of our thoughts are negative. And he has these ways that he describes this. It's like a colony of ants getting in your kitchen. We've all had this happen before. And how do you get rid of them? So for him, ants, ANTS, automatic negative thoughts, can only leave through PATS, positive affirming thoughts. And he teaches you that we have to change our mind on certain things, and we cannot be stuck on ourselves, or else and our own issues and our own failures, that's still being stuck on yourself. I love Rick Warren, who wrote that book, The Purpose-Driven Life, that tens of millions of people read this book. But he begins with a very powerful sentence, and his opening sentence is, "It's not about you. It's not about you or your failures."
It's not about us anymore.
No.
We've come to realize that.
See?
We're on a long journey, and we're taking our time. Trust me, we're moving at a snail's pace, but we're trying our best to realize that it's not about us anymore. We've had our thing. We've had our time.
That whole idea of 80% of negative thoughts, it's almost like what we talk about with suffering. You almost need that negative in your life to actually like push through and get better. If you had positive thoughts your whole life and lived this rosy life, and you probably wouldn't appreciate everything you got.
Nor would you have the perspective to speak to anybody. And that's why I think your message is so powerful, because there's
Been there,
nobody,
done that
there's
type
nobody,
thing.
yeah, there's nobody that speaks like you who doesn't know what suffering is. It's impossible. You know, if you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth and had everything that you ever dreamed of, there's no way you're going to be able to connect with me.
I got you.
There's no way. And that's why, you know, your good friend Pastor Adam Burt, he connects with me because we're sports guys, and I know he's got some junk, and we talk very frequently. But
He's a lot bigger than me, so I have to be nice to him.
he fights better than you, that's for sure.
He
He actually uses a fist instead of like
I've
this.
seen some of his fights. He's not all that good at fighting.
He got beat up pretty bad.
Yeah,
Quite a few times. But no, he's a beast. He stays so fit.
yeah, I've worked out with him a
He's
few times.
like rock solid.
Totally.
I've worked out with him a couple times, and for a 50-something-year-old man, he can still move.
Oh
He can
yeah,
still move.
he's got the goods.
Well, do you subscribe to that, where to be good here, you have to be good here? That's something that Mike and I both
You mean like
live
the
by.
heart and the brain connection?
The body mind connection more.
Body,
more.
mind,
Yeah.
spirit, soul, body.
Right. So I always feel cleaner when I've had a good workout and I've wiped everything out.
Oh man, absolutely. I mean, we know it's all by design. Those three work together. The scripture is so clear on that. Now, bodily exercise is of limited value in the sense that it can't get you to God. You know, I mean, you can look like a mini God, but it can't get you to God. But it's good. The scripture describes that as being important. That we are our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit.
You know, they have certain words in the Bible. They have pleasing to the eye, like Joseph was pleasing to the eye, or some
He was
word
GQ
verbiage like
Joseph,
that.
right? Of
I
course.
think so. One of our sponsors is X Body. Right?
yeah.
So X Body is a health and wellness center. And Joseph would be a perfect fit for this because they do everything from gut checks. They just try to keep your body together.
Yeah.
Because if your body's falling apart, your mind's going to fall apart.
Absolutely.
And they'll do different types of therapy. They'll do IV. They'll check your liver enzymes. They'll check anything you want, just trying to make you a better person. Because, like I said, you need to have a solid body to have a solid mind.
Well, I believe in it, man. So what's their address?
Right here in Wayne, go to xbodyus.com and you'll find out all the information for them. But they're really good. We had a meeting there, beautiful place. But that's
Pastor, now you know why his mind is so screwed up. Did you see that body? He doesn't. I keep telling him he's got to take care of himself in order to get his head right.
You guys
first
gotta
time
go
I
on.
met Pastor Ron. Now listen, I don't look like the most religious person in the world. But the first time I met Pastor Ron, he saw me in all my glory. I knew you were coming, but I
The
didn't.
tatted thing?
I got tattoos all over.
Right.
He accepted me like I was a
Oh man,
brother.
I think it's pretty cool. Everybody with the tat has a story, and I usually just go right at it. You want people to see it, so I
course.
just asked the
It's very
obvious question.
expensive. It's very expensive. I want to show it off.
Oh man,
But yeah, that's
It's like women with fake breasts. I paid for them. I want to show them off. You paid for the tattoos.
Okay.
You're going to show them
you
off.
didn't hear that from me.
But you found this new path in college, which again is very rare in itself.
Sure.
How did that lead into the ministry?
Yeah.
That's a it's one thing reading the Bible. It's another thing going out and teaching the Bible.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it was a progressive discovery of who God is, getting to know God. Because if you get to know God, you begin to trust God or love God. Because what's not to love about God if you really understand who He is and what He's about versus what you've heard or what you think or what you feel? Because a lot of us tend to want to blame God for every bad thing that happens to us. we're just in a screwed up world. It's messed up. It's jacked up. But we're the ones who are responsible for that. We caused the mess that we live in, and for the most part. And so the world that we live in is fallen. It's on our DNA. When Adam had that first, he and Eve began to rebel from God. I mean, here they had the choice of all these hundreds and thousands of fruit trees, and God says, well, there's just one, which is the test, the ultimate test. And that's where they failed. And so everything, then there's separation from God. Their kids, one of their kids killed his brother, which is family dysfunction to the max. Then there's the separation internally where they begin to feel guilt and shame. Guilt and shame wasn't in the original creation. That's something that we all have to work on. We carry this baggage that God does not want us to carry. And then there's the environmental separation and dysfunction as well. I mean, the world is falling apart. So for me, I just more and more started seeking God for what is my purpose in life. And that's when things began to be more and more clear. I thought I was going to go to graduate school for psychology and different things like that. And it just became very clear that God had given me a gift of persuasion and influence and helping people to get right with God. And so that became my mission. And I didn't go off to a seminary somewhere, not immediately. I did later, years later. But I just began to see Bible studies form. One formed in my own dorm room, and things happen, and then grow into a church, and meaning there's a body of believers who are committed to one another in a community. They're going to help each other, and they're going to build each other up, and not tear each other down, and help everyone to begin to achieve their dreams and goals and aspirations. So that's where my pastoring began.
But your pastoring, how did that change your perspective on suffering? And I'll give you an example of how it changed mine. Is instead of me looking at, man, why did this happen? This is awful. I must be the unluckiest guy in the world. And again, gets back to that coincidence thing, where now I might look at things and I'll study it a little bit and I'll say, there's a purpose behind this. I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
I'm not at an elevated position where I'm able to see this stuff. Where, if you believe in God, and listen, we're talking here theologically, it's your higher power, whoever your higher power is.
sure.
He's up at an elevated position. He can see the entire battlefield.
Yeah.
It's things that you and I can't see. So then there's faith.
You only see the fight in front of you.
Correct.
Right.
So there's faith involved in that. So now I look at things a little different. So did it change your perspective on how suffering is?
Oh, it totally
happens?
did. I mean, that story with my own father, he became such a great man that when he was dying, on July 4th, he died 2012. So 10 years ago, he was dying. And I walked out of his hospital room, and
Is
there
he a
was
big John Adams, Thomas Jefferson fan?
no.
Because they both died on July 4th.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I don't.
Within
Anyway,
hours of each other.
so I walked out of his room when this was like the day before he passed, and there was this long line of men, mostly men, and I said, "What are you guys all doing here?" They're saying, "We came to say goodbye," and some had tears in their eyes, and you begin to look at how God can, and his own family rejected him and said, "We don't believe that you can be this way. We don't believe that you're," and they were still so stuck in the pain that he caused for his family that they could not forgive. Whereas my brother and I definitely forgave and built a relationship with a man who was formerly crazy, but he wanted it and he earned it. And
It's like the movie Mercy Me, or about I Can Only Imagine.
Oh,
Have you seen that movie?
yeah, I did. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie.
But that sounds your parallel lives with
Yeah.
Bart Millard. who-
Similar.
He says it. He goes, I watch God transform a guy who I thought was a monster
Yeah.
into the man that I wanted to become.
Right.
Which, if you ever have children or a messed up relationship with your father, you watch that, there's no reason. There's no way you're not crying during that movie.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Right. A very touching movie. Right.
Now you said you and your brother reconciled with your father. Nobody else from the family did? Or
Well, my sister was so removed from him because he walked away, and she had a stepdad who she more identified with, and she actually, she's a wonderful person. I mean, our whole family was so torn apart, so broken and broke, just so jacked up. But my brother's pastor in Scandinavia. My sister became a pastor.
Really?
Yeah, I became
It's a family
pastor.
business.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where the business is. It's people business, but really, it was just fascinating how we would be the least likely to be the ones who serve God and believe in God and believe in Jesus Christ. But it's been amazing, and the part about suffering is that suffering does change our lives and changes our perspective. I think some people have got to remember, the people maybe who are watching right now, they're going through some of the darkest stuff of their life, and they're wondering if they can hang on. And there is a shelf life on trials and suffering. It does end. It does end. But our job is to get, not to avoid it, but to get everything that we can from it, recognizing that our trials can change and we can be transformed in the process.
We call it the light at the end of the tunnel
There
theory.
you go. That's it.
You know, I mean, we've said it a million times on here. When you're going through that dark tunnel,
That's right. You can't see it.
you can't see the light at the
No.
end of the tunnel. It's so dark in there, you can't even see the people that are standing next to you helping you through that tunnel. Till you get to that light, then you see all the people that were actually helping you.
I was pushing him through.
Yeah.
I just kept pushing him, knocking him down because he couldn't say. I could
You
say,
know,
but he
and
couldn't
what's
say.
great about that, Kevin, is that you had your own issues, and here now you and you, Mike, you guys are helping others to make it to their finish line and get through. And I one thing that shocked me is how many people don't make it. We have to be there to help. That book, Miracles in Manhattan, when I compiled 50 stories of 50 people in Manhattan who claimed that they experienced a miracle, these are all people who I know personally. And we had hundreds of stories to choose from. So we chose those 50. And here's what, as I was compiling and editing and helping to put this together, one thing I realized is that God doesn't just always act directly in the person, but he raises up other people to come alongside and help people, whether that's good news, helping an exchange of thoughts, sometimes physical needs being met, spiritual needs being met for sure. But God uses people to help others get their miracle.
I'm sure your father felt that way as well.
Oh, he to his dying day, he loved me and he became a part of my life. He sat. Imagine this: that you go to this local church and there's my dad was sitting behind me. I was on the front row every Sunday before I would go walk up and speak and give my message, and he would put his hand on my shoulder, and he would say something like this. He would say, "I'm really proud of you, son.
Wow.
I'm really proud of you."
But, you know, talking about going through that tunnel, you were one of the people that were walking through that tunnel with your father.
Totally.
Standing right next to him, helping him right through.
Yeah. And I had so much pain there. And then I had greater pain when I went through a divorce 20 years ago. That was really a painful thing to be abandoned, rejected. And
Did it conflict with your faith? You know, your faith is, you know, you love your spouse.
Right.
Your spouse is your number one. She's your primary.
right.
How did that conflict with what your life was?
Oh, it was a major conflict.
Yeah, but you're human.
Right.
Again, this is showing humanity.
This is not People magazine where someone has a breakup and the next week on the front cover it's who they're really with, right? So that's Hollywood. It looks great, but it was not great. Yet at the same time, it was inevitable because for years things were slipping and cracking and breaking, and more issues come up. And it was like I was hanging on to the bumper of a car saying, "Would just stop. Let's please stop. Let's get help. Let's
So
do
being held together with duct tape.
Yeah, and so my tendency was just to get busier and then try to, certainly God will help me get through this. And I actually thought that he would. I thought that I would have a testimony, and I was hanging in there for my kids. I didn't want them to have to go through this. And then as it would be, it finally was just inevitable. It's like we're living two different lives, sleeping in two different places. And it just became clear that it was over. And so after that happened, and there's more that could be said, but that's enough. But when that happened, then right after that, I get this 9/11 happened, and I thought, well, I can identify with this. I'm having my own 9/11 in my life here, and then
Your towers are collapsing.
My life was just caving in, and to my great surprise, about a few months after that, I got this clear sense that I need to go to New York City and help the city and get my eyes off of myself. And that was the way that I began to fight back and met my wife, Lynette, there.
Which is a really
she's my wife now. She wasn't my wife then.
which is a really cool story how
right.
you met.
So you're a good storyteller too. You should tell it.
So
He's been telling stories his whole life.
Maybe he could have her have a better story.
yeah, like
His
Mike and I
life
are
is a-
friends. That's the biggest lie I tell.
His life is a facade.
So your wife Lynette, who I have not met, but I've heard you speak about her. The serendipitous thing, and I know it's
Yeah.
some people call it miracles, some people call it serendipity. It depends on how you view the world. Met you by chance out of an ad that you put out trying to start a church, which sounds insane. I'm going to tell you right now. It's like David Koresh tried to start a church.
Yeah.
You know, so
this-
it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. You know, it's pretty much that
Yeah.
next level insanity.
Oh, that's how you met me?
Yeah. So you take this, you come to this realization that a church needs to be raised out of the ashes. And what's really nice is you take a great event and you take a very tragic event and you create something beautiful out of the ashes. It's like a phoenix, you know, it's like the mythical creature, the phoenix. And so your wife's story about how she was supposed to be in the towers when they went down.
Well,
but
she was working at the World Financial Center, and which is right beside one of their buildings, or the one right beside them, I think, went down. But she was supposed to have a morning meeting that she was leading this with several clients for Deloitte, and that was the one meeting that she ever had where they said, "We don't have any offices remaining. We're going to send you." And they sent her to their farthest reach office, which was in Hartford, Connecticut. So that morning at 5:20 a.m., the car picked her up and drove her to Hartford, Connecticut, and she missed that moment.
So again, getting back to coincidence.
Getting back to the plan.
Was it a coincidence or was it a plan? And there's lots of stories out there just like this where you just missed it. But then she goes to Tennessee, where it wasn't New York.
She was in Connecticut.
She stayed in Connecticut that night. I know.
Right.
I read that part. But then she was somewhere else where she sees this ad.
Oh, that was it. That was her Christmas break. She went to her family in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know it started with it.
Right.
And you had gathered up all this money.
Yeah.
And you put an ad in.
It was a Charisma magazine. So it's a national or international Christian magazine. And it was the first time ever that I don't really believe in advertising my church. I just, either God's going to do it or it's not worth it if we have to fund it and prop it up. But this 9/11 was an exception. That we didn't even have an entity, no organization, no money, no bank account, no name. Internet was barely going at that time. So we decided, let's let anyone who may know us, and there were four of us, four co-founders. And we put that we had a theater open up on 44th Street. It's like a simple walk to where the ball drops in Times Square. And when the ad came out, we called it The Miracle on 44th Street because that's where we were. And
because the Miracle on 42nd was already taken.
Or 34th.
34th.
Miracle on 34th
Right.
Street.
Right. So, yeah.
42nd Street was back in the day when you used to go hang out over there. I know what you're talking about.
Listen, the fact that you know where it is really bad. But you
guys.
So do you have a copy of that article? Do you still?
I do.
You got to try to send it to me. I got to read
Okay,
that article.
yeah,
I got to
sure.
really try to read that.
It was just a one pager for 3 months. It was ridiculously expensive. But I just thought, okay, we're going to take a chance at this. Only one person ends up showing up because of that. I was so deeply disappointed. I thought at least a couple hundred people will see this and they'll remember, they'll know one of us and they'll want to come to our new church. And everyone was seeking God in the desperation of 9/11. I mean, we all know where we were at that moment, how we felt, what we were going through. Of course, many police officers, like you guys probably know some of them who did not make it. Yeah, tragic time. And it still gets to me today. And so
the one person who sees it.
Yeah, she was. It was Lynette's mother, had that magazine that she subscribed to, and she said, "Hey," to her mom, to Lynette. She said, "Look at this. This looks like some guys that you might know. They're starting a church in New York City." And she looked at it. She said, "They look like great guys. I'll go check it out." And so she came in January, whatever it was, 5th or whatever. And
sounds like a setup. Just so you know, it sounds like a setup.
I know. It's it was quite a coincidence.
Coincidence.
There we go. Serendipitous. You could use that word too.
So Margaret was on to something here when she asked this question.
I know.
Yeah. So, but the coincidence or the plan, she comes to New York and finds you.
Yeah, she did. First she found a church community, and then it was like a year later when we were seriously getting to know each other.
I can't imagine somebody just showing up, and that's again that leads me to believe that again I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that things are meant to be for a reason.
Sure.
9/11, as tragic as it was, had to happen. And if you think about what you built with your church and what happened after 9/11, the United States became a real genuine community. I know we've gotten
it's so true, isn't it? I agree 100%.
Yeah. And we've gotten a little far away from it now.
For sure.
Because our memories are very short.
All right.
You remember, you couldn't even buy an American flag back then.
Yeah.
We were never so whole as a country as we were right after 9/11.
And like you as a child, the country has become a little fractured, a little broken now.
Very polarized, divisive. It's sad right now.
And I loved that feeling of community where it didn't matter whether you were black, white, Asian, Spanish, male, female. You walk down the street, hey, how you doing? You okay? Hey, how you doing? And
That's exactly right.
It was
I remember
a real
that.
genuine community.
I think there was something like 90 ethnicities died in the towers, and our church now has 69 different ethnicities. Our goal is that we would hit that 90 one day through our churches in New York City, New Jersey, et cetera. So really amazing that God not only creates, but what's more difficult, Kevin, creation or redemption?
For me, it was redemption.
I think for everybody.
For me, it was redemption.
It's such an uphill battle, but that's what we experience on this side of our disasters and our situations. My first marriage that ended, and then to meet Lynette, we've been married 17 years right now, and she's been the greatest stepmom. She's been an incredible wife. We're madly in love still after 17 years. It sounds like I might just be embellishing this or whatever, but actually I never really say it like that because it's so hard for some people to believe because they still struggle in relationship. But somehow what I went through in my first marriage and what I went through in my childhood, because everything begins in a family. All the dysfunction that we have usually began, and it's in the family setting, and then it's generationally passed down.
In your molding years, when you're a child, that's when you get molded into the person that you are. And
Absolutely.
You did leave out one chapter in this book, and that's my connection with Pastor Shino Prater. Okay,
Yeah.
so I actually have a connection with him. I meet him for the first time, and he tells me he played for Penn State in '97.
Yep.
I said, you played for Penn State in '97. You know a guy named Pete Marzak? I went to high school. He's a good friend of mine.
No way.
He's like, yeah, I know Pete. I know Pete real well. And I said, call Pete up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm standing here with Shino Prater. You know him? He goes, yeah, no. And so I get them, and I reconnected them. And then I see him occasionally because Shino lives real close to me now. But that's coincidence? Or was it a plan?
Kevin, I'm glad you told me that. So Shino Prater, my son Nathan Lewis, and Kaz Enuma are now the three pastors in our Manhattan congregation. And Adam and Dottie in the New Jersey church. So now two of our congregational leaders. And they are doing an incredible job. It's called Every Nation, New York City, everynationnyc.org. We'll connect you with any of our churches in the region. And we have a lot of things going on around the world, overseas, a lot of different places. But the two that I'm so fond of is what's happening here in New York City, because this came as a result of pain and suffering. Our church was here because of that. I would not be here had it not been for 9/11.
You have repurposed suffering, which is what we do. When we walk somebody through a journey, when they start telling their story, we try to show them that you just don't have to sit in that valley. You can climb that mountain and get to the top again just by taking what you've learned and repurpose it the same way your father did, the same way you did, the same way the people of New York City did after 9/11. We repurposed suffering, we came together, and we created something. So creation can only come out after redemption.
So we say it's absolutely creation, fall, restoration, and then full-blown reconciliation or transformation. And so that that is the cycle that we all live through: the creation, the fall, then the redemption, and then the restoration of everything. Everything gets restored.
Looks like God sort of gave up in the middle of creating Mike.
You know,
So
there's
it's like
still
half
hope for
formed.
Mike, though. There's breath in his lungs. Mike, there's still hope for Mike. Even Mike.
Well, so I
Pastor, don't cater to him, please. Because listen, we're running out of time. Remember, he'll go on for an hour about me now. He's just jealous.
But you know what's
he can't
great
look
about
like this. That's his problem.
It's so funny.
but I Pastor Adam calls me. I don't go out, and I'm not that type of person to say, "Oh, you got to believe in God. You got to believe in God. You got to believe in God." It's just not me. My journey has led me to the church. I don't talk about it a whole lot on the air, but Pastor Adam calls me a guerrilla minister. All right,
Yeah.
as in guerrilla war.
I got you. Yeah. Right.
Because I'll go out there and I'll steal things from him constantly. Like I steal words from every sermon that he says, and I'll call him up and I'll say, "Hey, PA, you know, I just stole this from you." He goes, "I don't worry about it. I stole it from C.S. Lewis, and I stole it from this person. I stole it from this person." So we're trading this information to get it out to a broader audience. But the way that I show people my path is, I said, "Look, this worked for me. You know, this is how I live my life." And it seems to be feeling really, really good. And I tell people when they say, "Yo, you go to church every week," and I'm not perfect by any means. He'll tell you every day I'm not perfect.
Oh, he already warned me.
Yeah. But I say when I leave, I feel better. And that's the bottom line, right? You know, whether you believe or whether you don't believe, whatever you do in life, after you leave that experience, did it make you feel better or did it make you feel worse? People can say that with drugs. George Carlin had this great interview once where he said, you know, the first time you do a drug, it's probably 90% joy or 90% happiness. I try not to use that word joy. I'll get to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. It's probably 90% happiness and 10% pain, you know, coming down off it, whatever it may be. But as time moves on, you see that statistics start to change, where at the end, when you're full-blown addict, it's usually 90% pain, sometimes 100% pain,
right,
and no joy. So every experience I walk out of now, if it doesn't end in joy and it becomes more pain than joy, it's time to move on.
What's the sense of doing it?
Yeah, it's time to move on. You know, I love going to the gym. It's always been almost 100% joy to me. And the day that it doesn't become joy to me, I'll walk away. But those are the things that are unshakable. You know, that's I talk often about primary identity, that unshakable thing, and we see this a lot as cops. So a lot of police officers we see, they take that career in law enforcement and they make it their primary identity. That's who they are. And then what happens? That career ends, like ours ended. And now you're left out in the darkness going, what do I do now?
right.
What do I do now?
Or you have guys that are staying too long because that's their identity.
Correct. Because that's all they are. And it's the wrong thing to do. Your primary identity needs to be something that's unshakable, unchangeable. And if you find that, you can still be everything underneath, but that's not your identity because it's going to go away.
Kevin, you're sounding like a pastor, man.
You don't want me teaching your
You
congregation.
just ripped off all of Adam's stuff and
Oh,
his
I just
influence.
steal everything.
Listen, that's all he's doing. Adam gave that sermon probably 2 weeks ago. So
Adam gave that sermon, I'm going to say more than that, probably 6 months ago. But yes, I did steal it from him.
How much time do we have left?
Looks like we're got about 12 minutes, and we got to
So-
get into Miracles in Manhattan. So
Well, let me just mention this, that the worst time of my life was watching my third son, Jordan. I have 4 sons, Nathan, Christian, Jordan, John Luke, great kids. Jordan was incredibly special, born 1990 in North Carolina on a cloudless day with a rainbow on it. He was born. And I thought, this kid is incredibly special. And he was very quiet, very shy, but very strong in every way, physically, but mostly emotionally, spiritually, very, very solid. And of all my kids, and he became the one who was walking that straight as an arrow line. And I don't know how you do that. It wasn't my story. Wasn't my story. But he was solid, and he lived an incredible life. And when he was in college, he went on a mission trip to Tanzania into a place that was very, very, very dangerous and risky for a lot of reasons. And they suffered so many different attacks and things like that that they had to endure. They built a birthing clinic. And at the end of it, the team leader said, all right, who wants to go in and share the good news, the gospel? Who wants to go into the tribe there and share? And he raised his hand and said, send me. So he went in with one other kid, and all of a sudden people began responding to the gospel. This is a tribe of 161,000 people, and they had never, there's none of the three B's, no body of Christ, no believer, and no Bibles. And then all of a sudden things began to change. He comes back and he started telling me the news of everything that happened, because they started a church in the birthing clinic they helped build. And he started telling me the whole story, and I was just blown away. This quiet, shy kid is all of a sudden just doing this kind of stuff. I can't even believe it. I mean, the story was unbelievable. I mean, elephant stampedes, killer wasp attacks.
Yeah, everything
black
kills you out there.
mambas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Everything
all this
kills you out
stuff
there.
was going on. Cars turning over. Somehow all those, it was like 10 men, and 10 young men, and they all survived, did great. He comes back, he's telling me a story. He said, he said, yeah, I had 2 or 3 nosebleeds every day. I said, well, we should go check that out. Went, checked it out. They thought it was some sort of a fungus or something like that, and they started looking deeper. MRI, they found that there was a tumor, a cancerous tumor the size of a tangerine in the back of his skull, wrapped around both optic nerves, and we had to get him out of school right away, immediately, put him in the UNC Cancer Center, where they began to, for 6 straight months, he had 72 rounds of radiation, 3 surgeries, 8 rounds of chemotherapy, popped up 6 months later as if hardly anything happened, but he didn't look the same. And he popped up, went back to school, graduated with honors on time, he was homecoming king. The girl who was his secret girlfriend was the homecoming queen. They got married. It's just a Cinderella story. And then they planned to get married. He gets a great job as an analyst. He's driving a great car. He's the king of the king of the hill, and living the big life. And then right before they were getting engaged, I took him at 8 a.m. one morning to pick up his engagement ring, a beautiful ring. And we pick it up, and that day he goes into his absolute final medical treatment, and he finds out that, this was his last one after 18 months of battling this cancer. They said, this is your final test. Why don't we just do a quick lung check? Because he finished all the surgeries and radiation with 20/20 vision. Every medical doctor said that's absolutely 100% insanely impossible.
Especially with it around his optic nerves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They said, you may go blind. You will lose partial eyesight. You will. And he comes out with 20/20 vision. So we're thinking, God did a miracle. This is amazing. And God did do a miracle. But then the next 18 months, he starts to have some small symptoms, this and that. So he goes into his final checkup, and they found it in his lungs. It had metastasized. They got married about 2 months later. They got married. And then a few months after that, he dies. 30 years old.
Terrible.
Somebody once told me, and there's nothing I could say that would ease the pain of a loss of a child, because we're not supposed to outlive our children.
Absolutely.
It said, when we're born, we start our journey on how to learn how to live. When we're born trying to learn how to live. When we're here, we try to master that. Those that are taken early reach their goal. So it sounds like, from what you're telling me about your son, is he learned how to live. Like, he got it.
He did.
He got it.
It was like he lived a full life at the age of 30. It was complete in a sense. Now for us, it's C.S. Lewis calls it. He says when you lose a loved one, it's like an amputation. He says you always miss what you don't have, but you keep on going. You just keep going.
That had to test your faith.
Oh, it shook me to the core. I mean, the pain, and you know what's good about that is I'll never forget the pain. I'll never forget sitting in a McAllister's deli in Tulsa, Oklahoma, watching all these happy people around me, and I just think, I just found out my son has terminal cancer. I'm just sitting there, just looking at this, and it was. I mean,
how do you even grasp that?
Yeah. I mean, the advantage I had is that my mind was fairly renewed from what I every day I try to read the Bible and see, what does God think? What does he feel? What does he think? What does he say? And that getting into me became an antiviral power. It became an antibody. And so it had a layer of me, not my emotions, but my spirit was strong. and I stayed close to God, knowing that he did not cause this, but he's going to use it. And like toward the end of his death, now there's no human being that could ever replace Jordan. He's just an incredible kid. And everybody who knows him, anyone who's listened to this who remembered him, know that he was just so kind. I don't think he ever one time, his wife said, he's never, ever had a cuss word. Now, I'm sorry for your viewers to know that he didn't learn that from me. He didn't learn it from you guys either.
Yeah, I was going to say he's never been on a suffering podcast.
No, that's true.
Right.
But was there, looking back on it now, how many years ago did he pass?
It was in 2014, March 20th, 2014.
Having some distance from it, do you see, and when I'm looking at something even as horrible as that, I'm trying to look for the purpose. I'm really, really trying to look for the purpose. Do you think there's any purpose to extract from that?
Well, there is, and that is a few things. I mean, the reality is life is short for all of us. Let's not kid ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Everybody has an expiration date.
One of my dearest friends died today.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
It was a bummer. Yeah, I was in Queens when I got the news. Dear friend, Dr. Steve Green, COVID battle. I got his call today, and his wife said, I want you to know that Steve right now is in heaven, and he's looking for Jordan. That's my son. He was Jordan's mentor.
Really?
This happened today.
You know, I look at that as the death of my grandfather. He was 22 when I died, and I'm grateful. I look back, and here's my purpose. Here's the purpose in the loss of the greatest man that I ever knew. It's I got to spend 22 years.
Yeah, there you go.
With this incredible guy who taught me everything about how to be a man. Some people don't get that opportunity. I better be grateful for those 22 years.
Well said.
Yeah.
A lot of people, we're always complaining, looking for something else when we just have to accept what has God given us, and let's celebrate that. So I can really, truly celebrate his life. A couple things happened. Number one, my wife, Lynette, she helped me raise my 4 teenage sons, but she really longed to have children. She couldn't. And amazingly, she wrote in her journal one day, said, I'm going to have twin girls. The oldest will be named Victoria, the youngest Isabella. She flat out just wrote down something that would happen in the future. And it couldn't happen because Jordan was passing away and all these other things happened before. And our lives were just swept up with all the sort of the trauma and stuff like that. And right in the middle of that, we get a phone call from a birth mother who said, I heard that you might be interested in twins. And I thought I was having a boy, but I'm actually having twin girls. And can I interview you? So she interviewed us, and we didn't know what that meant, whatever. But Lynette got our adoption papers going and got them ready. And then we get this call from the girl again. She interviewed us, and then 9 days later, they were born. It was on December 25th. They were born outside of Bethlehem.
Christmas babies.
Right. And
Right outside of Bethlehem.
Yeah, in a state.
Oh, my gosh.
So it became this like sign of life, of healing, and Jordan got to hold his twin sisters.
That's pretty cool.
For weeks before he passed. Held them as his body was just falling apart. His wife went on. She was sad, but she ended up marrying one of Jordan's best friends. And then there was
How do you think Jordan would feel about that?
I think he would probably be happy because he's healed. He's well.
Wasn't
He's
the best
well.
man at the wedding during his wedding, right? Because isn't that the best man's got to step in case the
Yeah, it's sort of like that.
Yeah.
And that goes back into Scripture. Actually, there's a technical name for the next brother in the line should take over where that brother left off. It's a weird thing. I know. It's too much to comprehend right now, but.
So let's get into Miracles in Manhattan, because I do really enjoy this book because it's short little chapters. It's easy to read, and it's kind of like reading the Bible. You're not supposed to read the Bible all at one sitting.
True.
You got to read it in short little bursts, page a day, whatever it may be. And you can't read this all in one shot. It doesn't make sense to read it all in one shot. You read one little story, one little vignette, and then you reflect on it.
Yeah.
Like, wow, well, this happened because of this, and then because of this happened. how did this come about? Like, what was the genesis of the idea for this book?
Well, we saw so many miracles beginning in the Lambs Theater in Midtown Manhattan, and then our other congregations in New Jersey and some other places in Manhattan and other Philadelphia, different places. We just started compiling stories that people had either written to us or videoed, and we just began to get them put out in a written format. And we recognized that these are all people that claim to have had a miracle. I specifically compiled it where there'd be no preaching and no teaching, just stories. These are stories. If you don't believe it, you have to go talk to the person who's written about it. This is their story. And we launched it on 9/11, the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 that we just had, a few months, 6 months ago. And it became just an instant hit. And people were just so happy to read these stories that out of the ashes, God has built a great church. Out of these ashes of 9/11, great things redemptively began to happen. And that's Jordan, my son Jordan, that's his story all the way. There's a foundation called Jordan Lewis Missions, jordanlewismissions.org.
We'll put that in our show notes. Drew, we got to get that in our show notes.
Thanks. And it's just a great foundation that was started by his peers at his university, Oral Roberts University. They launched it. People, whether you like them or not, but people like Joel Osteen and other people just said, this young man has a story. Let's just bless the foundation, because his brothers and his wife and his friends were all standing around looking at all these flowers being poured in. And somebody said, "Stop the flowers. This is ridiculous. Stop the flowers. Send something to Oral Roberts University Missions." And after 6 months or whatever, the chief legal counsel and the CFO called me and said, "We need to give you this foundation because your church needs to cover this. We can't do anything with this money. The State Department won't allow us to send money to these nations where there's a lot of persecution and stuff. We can't even send our kids there. We can't send the money there." So they shifted that over. And from that point onward, we have built 220 some water wells or pumps or wells. We have fed hundreds of thousands of people. There have been a Bible translated into Tanzania, where they had no Bible. They now have a Bible. They have the Gospel of Luke and about 20 other books of the Bible translated into their heart language. There's so many positive things, hospitals and properties. And now we just bought a building in Pakistan, right there, one of the most arid and difficult places in the world where they're persecuting and killing people. I mean, so many sad things that are happening in all of the nations, including America. But this is targeting people that have no chance ever of hearing the gospel. A lot of people, wonder, like, what do you do for those who have never heard? Well, you find a creative way to get the gospel into their hands. And so all this stuff came as a result of Jordan's situation. Likewise, back to the book.
Before you move on to the book,
Yeah.
Something just occurred to me. I asked the question, like, so I'm just going to start a church. You started a church out of the ashes of 9/11, right?
Yeah.
All these great things happened out of the ashes of Jordan, and now I get it. Now I understand it. That's an amazing thing. Why would you start a church? Most people, well, there's some less than ethical people that would start a church for nefarious reasons, for financial reasons.
Show me the finance. I don't know what you're talking
Jimmy Swaggart.
not the
We'll
case
talk
here.
to Jimmy
That's
Swaggart.
Right, Swaggart and
Yeah,
Baker. Right,
yeah,
of course.
but,
we
you
don't
know-
have water slides in our property.
Right. But
By the way, where's our property?
It
No.
makes sense now. This great foundation was built out of your son Jordan's ashes, and he's able to rise again and build a community and help people further the same way that every nation's has done. It's built a church out of the ashes, build a community. I really applaud you for that. Where can we get Miracles in Manhattan?
Sure. You can go to miraclesinmanhattan.org.
Okay.
I believe it's in the back of the book here. Oh, you could go to Amazon.
Go to Amazon?
Hey, just make it easy. Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
We'll also put another link to the show notes and that. And is there anything else that you want to throw out there? Like, I know you're on Instagram because we connect through Instagram.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch you, bro. You really have a lot going on, and I love it. Your story.
Yeah.
Your story is incredible. Yeah, I encourage everyone to listen to your story. It's really amazing. Your journey, all of that.
And yet, as many times as
Episode 9.
That's Mike's story. That's Mike's story. So every time I go out and talk about it, I'm in front of the camera. I'll tell this story, and there's a point in it where my redemption starts. But the worst time was when I gave my testimony in front of the congregation. It's 100 people. It's not a big
You're
deal.
the one in Jersey, right?
The one in New Jersey. The one
Awesome.
I got called on the spot. And
How'd
said,
you feel?
Nervous. I think, you know what? We'd just gotten back from a 20-hour flight back from Florida because it was snowing up here. And I went out snow plowing because I had customers I had to go take care of. I went out snow plowing and I got to church and I gave my testimony.
Oh,
I was deathly afraid.
you know who hates to be pulled up at the last minute and without preparation is that Adam Burt hates that.
I'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
We're going to call him on the
he
spot one
hates
day
it.
then.
I'm going to call him after this is done. And I said, I invited you here to sit in, but you didn't.
Adam goes to bed at 8:00 with his milk and cookies. Actually, it's his milk and red wine mixed in, I guess. But what?
It's tough to dip those cookies in straight red wine.
One of my dearest friends is Pastor Adam, and I really do enjoy the way you speak, and I follow what you say, and I think you're an amazing person, you're an amazing orator, you got an amazing message, all across the board. But we are coming to the end of this thing here, and you've gone through different suffering in your life, from the suffering of building a church, which I can't imagine, from losing your child to divorce to the way you were raised, to your relationship with your father. What do you think it's taught you?
I think it's taught me to endure, to overcome, to believe that God's not finished yet.
Patience and perseverance.
Yeah, and without faith and patience, we can't inherit what God has for us.
Well, that's the problem people run into. They want immediate results. They don't have the patience to look for the results. That's why people stay in those holes for that long.
And this is, if you would have been here during my opening, you would have heard me say that very same thing. But he can't sit on my openings anymore because all he does is try to make me laugh.
I don't try to. He just screws up, and I just sit there and go.
It's like the Carol Burnett show.
Oh,
Really? It's like the Carol Burnett show. Tim Conway and Harvey Korman trying to make each other laugh. It's really bad.
Too much.
Pastor Ron, I do appreciate this. This has been a great episode.
Absolutely.
I don't even know how we're going to timestamp this one, Drew, because there's just way too much to go through on this one. There's just all these little nuggets of information.
Tell you what I'll do. If you come and visit us when we go in our broadcast deal, you come in and see us. I'll come back. We'll just help each other along the journey.
Well, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what Mike and I do. That's what we do now. You need us? Okay, we're there.
I love that.
We tell people all the time, once you're on our podcast, you become part of our family. And we're there for everybody in our family.
Well, where's my mug and my cigar to prove it?
We do have cigars.
Just kidding. Kidding.
Thank you very much for coming in. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of a Pastor. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned today. Illiteracy equals ignorance. Forgiveness turns suffering around. Suffering has a shelf life. Learn to forgive yourself. But most importantly, endure, overcome, and believe. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of a Pastor. Follow Pastor Ron Lewis at Pastor Ron Lewis.
At Pastor Ron Lewis.
Follow Mike at Mike_Fillets. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we will see you next time on the Suffering Podcast. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell.